What's up, bitches? It's the Tribal Council podcast, where on this podcast, Survivor represents our life, and when it is gone, so are we. My name is Ethan Kronk, and I'm joined by my co-host Connor Boudreau, and we are here today to finally talk about the finale of Survivor 50. How are you doing tonight, Connor?
I'm doing pretty good. This is definitely a long anticipated moment to finally get to the discussion of this that we have both been just kind of, I guess, for completely unrelated reasons, just kind of shoving this back a little bit by a little bit because I don't know, we didn't feel like it was the most pressing of matters considering how far past it already was at the time that we got around to actually trying to record it the first episode in the first place. But eh,
Hey, at the end of the day, we have we're in the off season, so if we take a little bit to post something, not the end of the world. That being said, before we get into the video, I guess announcements for the off season. We're gonna be continuing our new era placement rankings, trying to finish those before Survivor 51 starts. We might have a couple other random videos planned for the off season. We'll certainly do a preseason video of some sort on Survivor 51 once the press and everything for that releases. So probably won't talk a lot about Survivor 51 on this podcast. There are a few things that we can talk about based on what was shown in the trailer, but not a whole lot right now. But at the end of the day, we should probably just get right into it, talking about the finale and talk about Tiffany, who we are, used to talking about at the beginning of every video. Not usually for the reason that she was actually voted out, but obviously it's the finale, so she did not make the final three. She was the first person out of the finale. Kind of a typical placement for somebody who is either super over edited or super under edited. There's rarely ever like an in between for these fifth placers. Um, Tiffany obviously being extremely under edited, especially for the threat that she supposedly posed to the other players if she had made it to final three. But that it was for that exact reason that we knew she wasn't making it to final three, and for that exact reason that both me and Connor predicted that she would come in fifth place. Although we also both predicted that Joe would win immunity here, and we were both incorrect. So you win some, you lose some. Overall, though, I like Tiffany on this season. I think what we saw of her was great. I wish we had seen more of her. Um, I love to see that she was as big of a threat as she was, and I do hope that we see her back and we can get like an actual proper edit for her next time. But she worked well with Sari. She worked well with Aubrey. Although that's another thing that like kind of confused me is we had this Aubrey Tiffany relationship set up very early on, and then despite both making the finale, we just don't really see them working together a whole lot at the end of the day. I guess the only place where it maybe comes into play, and even then they don't really like portray this super well, but was last episode where Sari is trying to convince everybody that it was Tiffany, or sorry, that uh it was Aubrey that had told Sari about the Tiffany vote, and like you could argue maybe that's because Aubrey, Sari, Tiffany were like a three, and that's why that would make sense. But again, we weren't really shown that if that's the case, so I don't know. Again, I put that on Tiffany just being under edited in her entirety this season, but I did quite like Tiffany, and yeah, I think it's great that she made it as far as she did. But what about you, Connor? What do you think about Tiffany this season?
I'm gonna I'm gonna quickly touch the why I think that was shown is I think it was to help pump up Aubrey in the grand scheme of things, to show a relationship that wasn't necessarily the most important for the edit narrative, but just to show that it existed. It would be my best guess. That being said, yeah, Tiffany said it. It was garbage. I honestly, I'm sure they had their reasons for choosing to do it the way that they did. I don't I don't fucking know why. That was the conclusion they came to. But it's not my job to edit for CBS now, is it? And you know, there's a million players in Survivor history that you could wonder why things were edited a certain way. A million moments that you can question why the decision was come to. And not everyone's going to agree with everything. However, it was really cool to see the fan support rallying to the thought that Tiffany did kind of get skewered in the edit. And I'm sure that'll be a bit of a wake up call going forward, hopefully. But I think Tiffany's a shoe in for a 3-time player. I know that she was a favorite of a lot of people. I know that Jeff even said really positive things about Tiffany and her time on season 50 in a bunch of post press and during season press. So I think truly would be a good player to have for a third season that we get a more complete edit for, hopefully. And if not, then I feel like that would be Tiffany's last time is after 2 poorly edited seasons. But I feel like there's just no way we could get this. So
I should certainly hope we don't get another season of Tiffany not getting the screen time she deserves, because that would be unfortunate. But you know what? She was still a boss this season. She won multiple challenges, was seen as a massive threat near the end of the game. So, absolutely love Tiffany on this season. Now, at number 4, I guess, in fourth place, um, and now is actually, I guess, truly the last time for Connor to say this. So I'll let him take the floor.
you're damn wrong. This will not be the last time we see the man, the myth, the legend, RIZGOD, Riz God, baby, on Survivor. No way, no how. Rizzo, you're coming back, buddy. I don't care if we have to beg you into it because we know you're a Survivor super fan. We know you're trying to become one of the best of all time, and you are missing a win on your resume. So, god damn it, you're coming back. You're not losing in Fire. As a matter of fact, you're going to win it because someone's going to have to teach you how to make a fire, bud. That was so tragic. There's no worse way that you can end your Survivor back to back than being the first person in the American rendition of the show to lose fire twice. And to do it back to back after such a strong game that again flies so far under the radar that you could have pulled the big screen out and hey guys, here was the whole game that I played that you guys didn't realize the whole time. We already came in at such a disadvantage. Nobody knew who he was, which is a negative in the aspect of they didn't know how dangerous he could be. He proved to be an incredibly dangerous player again. They also didn't know what kind of reputation he had. And thus, he has no legacy, which already hurts him because Aubrey's story was such an important thing that gets brought up, and we'll get into that later. Rizzo had no story. Well, now he does. Thank you, Rizzo. You gave us an incredibly good character for 2 back-to-back seasons. But god damn it, learn how to make a fire.
For real, and I mean, I think Rizzo will probably return. I think I don't know, whether he'll do particularly well on a third season. We'll see. It could be kind of shaky for him, but I think he'll probably return. And just we can pray to God that he doesn't go home and fire making for a third time, as funny as that would be. Rizzo absolutely had a shot at winning the game if Aubrey hadn't won final immunity. As soon as Aubrey won final immunity, Rizzo was cooked. But maybe if Aubrey had gone home at Final Four, in a Final Three of Rizzo, Jonathan, Joe, that was definitely Rizzo's best possible Final Three situation. And, you know, it would have been between him and Jonathan, and I think it would have been competitive. So we weren't necessarily far off from potentially seeing a Rizzo win here at the end of the season, especially given Aubrey winning final immunity was a bit of a, you know, out of left field. Like, sure, Samotion is a challenge that anyone could potentially win. It's definitely a challenge that Aubrey could win, but if we're just talking in general about Aubrey winning a challenge, it's just not something that happens all too often. So I think we were, you know, again, potentially very close
Yeah.
to
It
a
did
Rizzo
kind of
win.
take a rogue guess, and I even
True.
Yeah,
This is where we mentioned that, me and Connor both predicted Rizzo would go home at Final Four. We were both correct. Connor was more correct about how exactly it was going to happen, and we said that Aubrey would win final immunity. I believe you said that she would take Joe with her to the final three.
I said that because it'd be funny. She's gonna put Jonathan Rizzo, and so we'd have a two-time fire-making loser, if I remember correctly.
Which, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So Connor does take the
Yeah,
point there, but worry
I get
not,
one.
because I will be taking a point from Connor later on. But we'll talk about that again later. But yeah, I loved the Riz God. I loved seeing him work with Suri and Ozzy. I loved seeing, you know, people like Colby initially not really like him, only to come around to him. I do think this was not as good of a showing from the Riz God as season 49, even if he was probably actually closer to winning this season than he ever was to winning season 49. I do think his season 49 game was still more entertaining, especially given he wasn't, sick for half the game. But at the end of the day, I always appreciate having the Riz God on my screen. Uh, and Jeff snuffing his torch and calling him the Riz God again was awesome. It almost felt like a callback to last season. So yeah, no,
And no one laughed this time. No one giggled.
yeah, no one giggled because they all respected the man, the myth, the legend, RICGOD Riz God baby. Now, to be fair, they all knew that that was a nickname that he went by in comparison to season 49, where I think most of those jurors, if not all of them, were finding out for the first time that anyone called him that. So I would probably I would probably laugh at him too a little bit, but yeah, no, great run for Rizzo, great season, unfortunate ending, but at the end of the day, look, you make the finale twice in a row. Can you really complain? Now, that being said, there's one more thing to talk about with Rizzo, actually, especially pertaining to this episode and pertaining to the live finale aspect of it. Jeff, bit of a a slip up,
Oopsies.
bit of an oopsie. Do you want to talk about that, Connor?
Yeah, he did my boy fucking dirty, bro. Sitting him down. Oh, here's the jury. Wait, what happened? Brother, it happens. I get it. Mistakes are made. However,
He done goofed.
holy mistake to make. That's crazy. Revealing the fire making results before we see it on the screen? That's tragic. Ah, man.
Poor
It's
Rizzo.
cooked.
Poor Rizzo. I remember seeing the backstage video of the like the rest of the cast watching that play out. And Genevieve was sipping a Corona through a straw. She had a straw in her beer. She was sipping her beer with a straw. Completely unrelated. I just thought that was funny. Um, but yeah, I mean, in 26 years of Survivor, Jeff is bound to make some sort of mistake like that. It's unfortunate that it happened to Rizzo. He handled it well, but what are you gonna do? Even Jeff, like, beyond making the mistake itself, which is obviously not good, but I think Jeff handled the fallout of it pretty well. Also, my conspiracy theory is that during the ad break, they might have, made a few cuts to edit down the fire making challenge a little bit, make it maybe a little bit less suspenseful because it did feel a little bit short. And I just feel like to put all that suspense into something that everyone knows the outcome for, talking about talk about dead air, right? Like, wouldn't have been particularly helpful or entertaining. So that's my conspiracy theory. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, insane moment in Survivor history for sure. And now we're on to the final three, and we talk about Joe Hunter. Um, is there much to say about Joe Hunter? I mean, he came in third again for many of the same reasons he came in third the last time. Um,
Yeah, I mean, he puts him in a pretty elite category for a couple of things that I think is interesting to note. Uh, the only new era player, as it currently stands in this point in time, to have never been voted out is Joe Hunter. He also becomes the second player in Survivor US history to
Hey now,
finish a
hey
game of
now.
Survivor having never received any vote, not to win or to be voted out. So,
Can I interject?
I mean,
You said only new era player to never get voted out. And you mean like returning, right?
oh yes, I mean I should say he has 52 games of game plays. Oh my god, days played in the new era, which is
Right.
the only player to have never been removed from the game in the new era. I guess is a better way of wording it.
Removed from the game is a good way to put it because, well, I mean,
Yeah,
even then, returning you still have to specify returning player because there have been
yeah,
many finalists, and otherwise you also have Jonathan who has never been voted out either,
yeah.
despite playing
So
twice.
only returning new era player to have never been removed from the game. And then the other sentence I said was correct. He is the only player in the new era and the second player ever in Survivor U.S. history to receive 0 votes throughout the course of a season. Not votes to win, not votes to be eliminated, just 0. So,
Wild.
uh, as unfortunate it is to do that for the not winning part, it is also incredibly impressive to go the entire game without being voted against at all.
True. I
And
believe Jonathan also went the entire game without being voted against.
that is also correct. Which I will say it's a little more impressive on Jonathan's part for certain aspects, but also Joe was a target fairly early on at certain points of the game. There was conversation he could go home. And yeah, he avoids it.
He stuck it out.
Regardless of the reason or the rhyme to it. I think Joe's game is a little underrated this time around for certain aspects, in the sense of just truly how impressive it is that he never received a vote, given
And
all of the circumstances and all of the situations where he easily, frustrated certain members of the cast and still never got a vote. And I get there's some logic to be had of, well, why throw votes at him, blah, 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 this, blah, 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 that. It still never happened. And that's, again, I will say, a somewhat impressive feat. That being said, he has been brought to the end twice in 2 seasons. And as you said, there's very obvious reason or fairly obvious reasons he's a third placer twice. So
I was thinking about his Survivor 38 game, 48 game, I should say, and and I was wondering if Joe's the only player in Survivor history to go into the finale as the adjective frontrunner and then come in third place.
don't honestly know.
In a season with a final three. I'm sure in seasons with final twos it's happened. Um, but because Joe was considered the adjective frontrunner by a slight majority of people compared to Kyle. I'd give it like a 55 to 45%. We're saying Joe versus Kyle would win season 48, and then Joe ended up coming in third. And I just wonder how many times that's happened in Survivor history. But that is very out of the scope of this video. Just something that I was thinking of because we were talking about Joe. But yeah, I liked Joe. I think I found him more entertaining this season than I did last time he played. But I also found him a little bit less likable at times than I did last time he played. So you win some, you lose some. At the end of the day, his game wasn't great. Uh, but I could agree with it being underrated in the sense that he never received a vote. Like Emily said, for better or for worse, everyone was kind of funneling their plans through Joe and making everyone felt like they had to make sure that Joe was okay with what was happening, and that speaks to some level of power that Joe had over the game. Um, but at the end of the day, his management of things in general was just not good. Having this perception that people need to babysit you essentially, or like people need to work around the way that you play the game in such a way where they feel like they can't play the game the way that they necessarily want to, can be a good thing if you're doing it intentionally. But with Joe, that's just not really the impression that we get. So realistically, Joe was never going to win the season. That was pretty clear from fairly early on. But I didn't mind having him on the season. And of all the honor and integrity type players, him and Coach are probably the two that I'm most kind of okay with. Um, when you look at like Jonathan, who we'll talk about in a second here, Stephanie, Chrissy, I'm just like, nah, get them off my screen. But Joe and Coach, I was happy to have on, and Ozzy, though he didn't really play that game so much this time around. And that's part of what I liked about him this time around. So, um, but yeah, no, I like Joe. Didn't love him. His game was okay. Definitely wasn't great. And him coming in third place made perfect sense. Me and Connor both predicted it. So, and we both predicted he'd get 0 votes. So now we move on, and we can talk about where I kind of earned a point over Jonathan, because we move on to, sorry, a point over Connor, because we move on to Jonathan Young, who received, was it 3 votes from the jury?
Yes. You predicted 3. I predicted 4 is where I lose the point here.
Yes, Connor predicted that Ozzy's vote would go towards Jonathan. I predicted that Ozzy's vote would go towards Aubrey. And that is where I won out over Connor. So we both won some, we both lost some. I do think Connor's um, Aubrey immunity, you know, sending Jonathan and Rizzo into fire making prediction was a lot more out of the box than mine, a lot more out of left field than mine, probably more of a pull. But let it be known, let it be on the record that ultimately Connor got one thing wrong, I got one thing wrong, and
Well, we better said we both got one thing right, and we both got Joe winning final
true,
5 wrong.
true. So we both got one thing wrong. We both got a few things correct, and then we each got one other thing wrong. But yeah, no. Jonathan, didn't like him. I didn't like him this season. Last season, I didn't like him this season. He's a weird guy. He gives me weird vibes. He's kind of seems a little bit of like a. He's very cocky. Very not even cocky. Isn't necessarily my favorite word for Jonathan. I think smug. Jonathan is very smug. Whenever he says something that he feels is like correct, he has this like smug ass way of putting things, especially when he's arguing with people. He just comes across consistently so patronizing. I would not want to be around Jonathan personally, and I can see why some of the players didn't seem to really enjoy being around Jonathan. His dream management was terrible. His social game overall was not great. The only credit I'll give him is that he played a better strategic game this time around than he did the last time. That much is for sure. But the strategic game doesn't win you the jury vote all the time, and that was made apparent by Jonathan only receiving 3 votes. So, womp womp. He's a bit of a sore loser afterwards. You hate to see it. Only strengthens my feelings towards him. But what did you think about Jonathan this season, Connor?
With Jonathan, I think it's a mixed basket. I think you're looking at a player who came in to set up with a mission. He had a goal in mind and a certain way that he wanted to try and change his perception as a player and his gameplay to elevate himself to a point where he could win. And I feel as though he both hit the mark and missed the mark in different ways. As you mentioned, strategically, there was a significant improvement. I mean, the real move I want to point out was the failed move on Ozzy. I think it highlights both the good and the bad of it. Somehow, in the grand scheme of things, he didn't succeed in any regard. Ozzy wasn't even a significant target that round, and yet Jonathan never got targeted for it. Jonathan got to the end of the game without receiving a vote. That is incredible, the way that he got someone else to fall on the sword for him. But at the same time, he was so incapable of getting the connections to make that move in the first place. And misreading people led to the mistakes that caused moves like that to fail. So, with every step forward, I felt like he'd almost take a step or two backwards. And it just kind of ended up being this, you know, literally 0 plus 1, 0 minus 1, where we just go up and down and up and down and up and down with Jonathan. So, ultimately, I feel like there was just some things that could be improved. And at the end of the day, he still had a fairly top to bottom great season. I mean, won multiple challenges, strategically held his own, and organized several key votes. Um, Set up a couple of the early jurors into really big positions where he could pull a blind side on them and or get rid of them in a crucial moment. And just again, he lacked the connection to people. He lacked the story. He lacked that emotional retention, that kind of thing that drives you to vote for someone with just too many people.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, Jonathan, despite playing a better game, probably still has a worse legacy now. And I would say in large part that's due to postseason press and the fact that he's been such a short sore loser. So it is unfortunate because he did play a better game, and also some of his postseason press, or even other people's postseason press surrounding Jonathan has been taken slightly out of context. Tiffany, for example, talks about how Jonathan was saying that she would be a bigger threat than Joe simply because she's a girl, like a woman, and that was something that was kind of taken at face value when Tiffany had explained that he had said that because Tiffany is a woman and the um, she would only have to win one more challenge to tie the all-time like female immunity record, whereas Joe, who had won the same amount of immunities at that point, would have to win two more, which would be impossible, obviously, in order to tie the male immunity record. So in a final tribal council situation, if Tiffany ties the record, she has that on her resume. Whereas if Joe wins four immunities, he's not tying a record in doing so. So even though on paper it's the same thing, he doesn't get to say I tied a record. Um, and there's I think some validity to that. The idea that somebody tying a record of any sort is certainly something that they can bring up at Final Tribal Council that could potentially make them more of a threat. So if that was entirely what Jonathan said and he didn't and he phrased it that way clearly and it seemed like even Tiffany was explaining that that was what Jonathan had actually said, that's not as bad as people are maybe making it out to be. But at the end of the day, am I defending Jonathan for the way that he talks about women? Um, I mean, he's constantly talking down to them on the show and like just being a patronizing asshole. So I don't want to defend him too hard, but that was one thing that I kind of learned about recently that changes my perspective on a certain moment with Jonathan. But again, at the end of the day, it's Jonathan. He's had plenty of time to prove to me that he's kind of an asshole and that he has done quite successfully. Um, so I'm not a Jonathan fan, if you can't tell. But I do have to admit, he definitely played a better game this season than he did last time around. And with that, our final player to talk about this episode, at least in detail, is the winner of Survivor 50, Aubrey Bracco, finally winning after her fourth season. And one thing I just want to point out, because I'm going to let Connor kind of get started on Aubrey, but I do just want to point out a lot has been said about Aubrey's edit and the fact that her winning edit hasn't been particularly satisfying. And I do think when we talk about her relationship with Tiffany, you mentioned, oh, they included that despite the fact that it wasn't going to be important in the edit to prop Aubrey up. My question is, if they're trying to prop Aubrey up, why would they not have made that relationship important in the edit? Right? Like, because yeah, they could prop it up by showing it despite it not being important to the edit, but they could also just make it important to the edit when a lot of the edit should be serving to help the audience understand why Aubrey ends up winning and making that win satisfying. Sure, without being necessarily being too obvious. I feel like Aubrey's win was just like the worst of both worlds, where it was kind of obvious, especially going into the finale with Suri being out of the picture, um, and it was unsatisfying. I just that's not a great combination for a winner's edit. But again, I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent about that because I want to let Connor uh, talk talk his talk about Aubrey. I know he has a fun fact or two to bring up. So
Well, you see, fun fact. Um, First things first. Did you know that it's been coincidental that, in Survivor history, the fastest time, 4 seasons played by a single player is exactly 18 seasons. A record that was previously held in solidarity by Boston Rob. Rob Mariano winning on his 4th season. And thus, both her and Rob are a list of players who are previously losing finalists, only 2 to win on their 4th attempt, specifically, for the first time, and on their 18th season, which ties them for the fastest. Insanely coincidental list of things. Not to mention, she also managed to be a winner from the old era on a new era season. That is something that, given the amount of new era players, would seem unlikely at the grand beginning of a season, especially a big one like this. But I think it helped show you a couple of things with Aubrey's game that maybe some people didn't realize. And that is, even with failure comes learning. A lot of people, myself included, I'll admit it, questioned bringing Aubrey back after how abysmal her Edge of Extinction run was. And yet, I think we can see that not only did she learn from that, she learned from her second game, which was again fairly solid, Final 5, and her losing game. She gets right to the end. And this time, the thing that was the dagger on her losing is the dagger on her winning. So, going forward, I think it's hard to judge players like Aubrey for being brought back. Because she proved me wrong and proved a lot more people wrong. That, yeah, she had a shit season. So what? She was a proven, incredible player. And I think it was fair enough that we finally get to see Aubrey hold the crown.
yeah, my main thing about bringing Aubrey back wasn't even that I didn't think she would play well. It was mostly just that she's kind of brought the same thing every season, but each time kind of more and more muted, less and less engaging. And was the season much different? I mean, I do think, she was a better character this season than maybe on Edge of Extinction, and because on Edge of Extinction, she barely lasted long enough to be all that entertaining. But I can't say that she was any more entertaining on this season than she was on Game Changers. And, I just don't feel like she even this season, brought a ton to the experience of watching the show. Her game, again, better than um, Edge of Extinction, and she does win, which puts her obviously in some ways above either of her first two games either. But her gameplay throughout most of the season just didn't feel as impressive as her gameplay on her original or her second season. So both as a character and as a player, she proved that she can win, which is great. But did she prove that she was an amazing casting choice necessarily? I mean, I don't. Somebody winning doesn't make them a great casting choice. I don't think Natalie White was ever an amazing casting choice. I don't think. I don't know. Brian Heidick is necessarily a great casting choice. I guess that's pretty up for debate though. Tommy Sheehan is considered pretty boring, and he won. So like she won. Can't take that away from her. She deserved it. She played a good game. Um, but did she really bring a ton to the season as a character, or even as a player for that matter? Aside from winning, I'm just not sure. I was fine with her this season. I don't think she was the biggest dud on the cast by any means, before or after watching the season. But at the end of the day, I see where we're coming from, but I don't know that she entirely proved that she was an amazing casting choice here. Um, had she not been cast, somebody else would have won, and it probably, most likely, would have been a more entertaining player. Um, or it could have been Jonathan, and then we should be counting our, lucky stars that Aubrey was cast on the season. I don't know, but at the end of the day, I have mixed feelings about Aubrey on the season, and I have mixed feelings about her winning game overall. Um, so slightly different perspective from me on Aubrey, I think. Um, Now we've kind of talked about all the players. We can talk about our feelings about the season as a whole. Quite frankly, shared a lot of our opinions obviously throughout the season. If I were to summarize my opinions on these seasons very succinctly, great cast. Um, the women needed more screen time. Aubrey's edit needed to explain her win a little bit better and make it more satisfying. And the celebrities were unnecessary. At times, they were frustrating. Same with the twists. But they the celebrities weren't as big of a thing as I expected them to be. They weren't as annoying as I expected them to be. And the twists overall, the only one that really played out in a way that I think was just like egregiously bad was the Jimmy Fallon twist. Billie Eilish idols were kind of just a dud. Um, and then Mr. Beast's fucking coin was horrific in concept, but as it actually played out, added a lot to the season, I think. Um, so between an amazing cast, kind of mixed edit, some weird twists, some weird formatting things, kind of strange celebrity, blah yada yada. I have significant criticisms about the season, but I think it was definitely a solid season overall. Um, I might give it a, and I hate to say it, but I truly might give it a 6 or 7 out of 10. And you don't have anything to say about that, Connor?
Next question.
Okay, well then my next question is your overall thoughts on the season, put succinctly, I guess.
All right. My thoughts on the season. Uh, I think this season will go down as one of the more interesting seasons in Survivor history. Not necessarily all for the best, not necessarily all for the worst. But I think a few things that are pretty apparent is the following. A, I think the season would be much better as a binge watch than I think it would be watching it episodically as we do. B, I think for the casual fans, this will be an all-time season. I think for someone who is not looking at the in detailed stuff that we do, I think this could be a top 5 season for a casual fan. In the history of Survivor, it's in the conversation, I feel like. However, for me and for a lot of other more Edgic based or like hardcore Survivor fans, there was a lot left on the table that I would have much rather seen changes going forward for big seasons like this than a repeat of this instance. And the particular one is I would like to just see more normal twists. The grandiose ones can be amazing. However, they can also suck when you have this many, and a lot of them, to be good, depend on a good outcome. Depending on something that the people want to see as the end result of a potentially questionable twist doesn't fix it. I, for one, will truly argue that any situation where a player can be removed from the game without a vote, without being injured, without otherwise breaking the rules, or some kind of challenge twist related to a vote tie is utterly stupid. Right? And for me, that Mr. Beast coin strikes the nail on the head of that category of instances. A player almost got voted out on a physical coin flip. Not the lack of safety that resulted from it, but the flip itself. Had Rick been eliminated by that coin, the entire landscape of how we can view elimination as a survivor could change. Because that could completely alter what is considered successful or unsuccessful about that twist. And I think even to the casual fan, that would have been a disappointing end result. Regardless of the highs and lows of the idea. Simply put, I'm going to mark that down as a bottom 5 twist that I've ever seen in the show. Maybe not objectively is it bottom 5, but for me it is. Personally, I will never accept that twist as something I ever want to see again. Not in Survivor. And with all that said, I still enjoyed it. I think big, grand seasons, just as a whole, will always be a success in Survivor when you bring back amazing players and amazing characters, wide variety of players. People like Suri will go down as an all-time legend, and just having her on a season makes it better. Ozzy, love him or hate him, may not the best player ever, but he makes a season better in certain ways. To see Colby and Jenna come back, from such a long time of Survivor history, it's amazing. And then to see newer players like a Rizzo or a Joe, Kyle Camilla, people like that, bring a new flavor to the game of Survivor, it's amazing. So, sure, I've said a lot of negative things. There's equal parts positives, right? We got a fresh new winner who has a storied history and adding to their resume and legacy. We get to see a brand new version of some of the most entertaining players, Haiku Coach. What a world we live in where that's something I can say happened. We get to see the Riz God go back to back. We get to see D, first juror. Crazy outcome that you don't expect. Genevieve, Charlie, Camilla, all getting pre-juried. That's crazy.
Fortunate is
And
what
yet,
it is.
we still saw so many amazing players go out after them. So, I think, in conclusion, I would say, for all it gave, the season was fine. It was good, and it served as a great benchmark for what is to come of the future of Survivor, as well as a good conclusion to a 50-year saga of a show, allowing us to turn the next leaf, the next page for season 51.
The open era.
Now, the open era. Oh boy.
um, I guess one more thing I want to talk about before we move on to maybe talking a little tiny bit about season 51 actually. Unless you were unless you had one more thing you wanted to add to that or
That was about it for my thoughts.
all right. So we did this for season 49. We even did it I think for season 48. Yes, we did. We definitely did. So I want to hear from you, Connor. Now this is a little bit different as a returnee season obviously, but one player from the season who is at the top of your list you'd want to see play a third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. One player,
Okay.
if you had to pick.
Now, I'm going to do something that might be a little surprising. Obviously, everyone here knows I want to see Rizzo come play a third time. I mean, I said it a lot in this episode. So I'm going to use this moment to talk about someone else. Talk about a player that I think needs to be a 3-time player. Talk about a player that I think could put themselves in the conversation of a top 5 player all time if their third season goes well. And as incredible of a run as they had in their first season, ultimately, it just wasn't in the cards for season 50. Or I should say, it wasn't in his Achilles. I think Kyle Frazier would be my pick. If I wasn't just going to go, haha, Rizzo, he's my favorite, arguably new era player ever, I think Kyle deserves and has earned the respect of tons of fans of the show. And even though he was quite literally eliminated from the game in the premiere episode, he needs a third game. And I will not feel as though his journey has been completed until I see either his torch get snuffed or him become the third 2-time winner.
I second that motion. The person I want to talk about, and there are so many good choices, obviously, but if I had to pick my number one, it's gonna be Christian. I want to see Christian come back for a third season, especially since, as much of a main character as he was in the pre-merge of this season, he went out shockingly early, and to see him play again, I think would just be amazing. He always makes for good television. Um, I'd love to see another deep run from him, but even if we just get him for a few more episodes in Survivor, I just think a third season from Christian would be awesome. So that's my pick. And, Rick Devens, Genevieve, Rizzo, Tiffany, all all players that I would absolutely love to see return at some point. But if I really had to put my vote onto one person, it would be Christian Hibiki.
I'll also add to that list, I think Devins, Camilla, Charlie, Q, and Savannah, for me at least, all need to come back.
I
Most of this
mentioned
cast,
Devens, but
he mentioned Devins. Well, he needs another mention.
okay.
He was that amazing. Um, I feel like there's just so many amazing players, especially the new era players that were in this season. For the most part, are all gems, right? You know, me personally, I'm not a big Emily person, and yeah, maybe I'd write her off. And Jonathan, I feel like this was a good way to conclude Jonathan for now. But heck, I'd even say bring back Joe. Give him some years to rationalize and grasp how his gameplay was perceived, and bring him back in 5 years, 4 years. Give him another shot. I'd be okay with that. And that's lower end of the new era players from this season. I'm still saying yes.
Yeah. What about trying to think of a new era player who like really just flopped, but like Charlie was still
Um,
entertaining. Yeah, I don't know that there was a
She
new
was
era
always
player.
entertaining.
I would
Savannah
I would say
technically flopped,
yeah,
but
I would say
again, she was
Savannah.
a winner.
I'd say Savannah's probably the closest new era player to really like just not bring much to the season, but she went out in episode 2. What are you gonna do? I guess at the end of the day.
And again, she came back with the unknown idea of her being a winner, but what about it, right?
Yeah, nobody knew how she won, why she won, what kind of player she was. It's scary. The fact that she survived a tribal council is impressive in its own right. So,
Yeah, and no other winner has back to back like this. So this was an idea for sure.
mm.
But I can't hold that against her, and I think she deserves a third season. Now, mind you, I would like to see it be Winners Award 2. But that's a whole other ballgame if we'll ever get that.
Hopefully one day, I'll throw my hat in the ring for Kyle being a very good contender to win a Winners Award too, though. Um, with that being said, I think we can kind of move on now to season 51. We've I think I've talked everything I want to talk about season 50 for the most part. Again, we'll continue to talk about season 50 in our videos. It'll come up, obviously. Um, so only major thing that I feel like we can talk about for season 51 without getting into, potential rumors or whatever might be floating around out there. We did see in the trailer, if you count them up, 21 players were shown in that trailer, which means it's official. We're getting a 21 player newbie cast. And I don't have a lot of thoughts about that. I think it's cool that we're, breaking another record when it comes to the number of people on a cast. Back to back records, most players on a cast period, followed by most players on a newbie cast. Pretty neat. What do you make of the 21 player um, of it
I
all,
just,
Connor?
I have so many questions.
Yeah, a
The
prime
first one
number
is,
is.
are we getting an exiled player on episode 1? And if so, uh,
It's weird.
sure?
It's weird. I don't know. I don't have a lot of personal opinions on that idea for a twist. I'd have to see it play out. I know we've seen it play out in the past, but like I'd have to see it play out on a modern season to really have too big of a feeling about it, I guess. Um, but two tribes we also know, yellow and purple tribes, pretty cool. Only other time we've seen that color scheme for starting tribes was Survivor Samoa. Um, the open era, every twist is on the table. I have to question when when exactly and how exactly was every twist ever not on the table. Y- you know what I'm saying? Like the
Yeah.
like they're always coming up with new twists, but there was never any sort of rule that they couldn't bring back certain twists, right? Like that. When was that ever a stated thing? We can't bring back the hourglass twist. It's illegal. It's not allowed. We've been mandated by CBS not to bring back the hourglass twist. To where that's been like something that we as the audience would know about, and now they're like every twist is on the table, anything could happen. And it's like, yeah, that's Survivor. That's every season. Any twist could randomly prop up as a surprise. I don't really get what the open up era necessarily represents or what that means or why it's significant, but maybe I'm missing something.
Honestly, I don't know that you are. I feel like it's just a weird thing to say considering every season of Survivor, you get that one player who's like, yeah, I don't know what to expect. We've seen so much in the past, and it's almost always brought up that like the past, these ideas of a time not so far away where all of these ideas existed. What will come next? Oh no. They're afraid of it. because they know it could exist again. So why are we making this an entire era? Whereas just every season has that one fan who just knows that all of these things still exist and could happen again.
Yeah. My only hope is that what all this means is that we get a change in format. Um, like not the monotony of the new era of like three tribes, 18 players, journeys, some sort of mergatory thing every single season over and over and over again. I hope that if nothing else, the open era just means every season's a fresh slate. Format is going to be switched up, and we can do different things. Have every season feel more unique. I know that's probably the biggest and most valid criticism of the new era, in my opinion. So, if the 50s kind of shake that reputation a little bit and give us more variety, I'm all for it as long as we're not bringing back the hourglass twist or do or die or anything stupid like that. I guess, but I don't know. We'll find out, and we'll have a lot to talk about when season 51 press officially starts and when the season 51 premiere airs this September. We'll have so much to talk about. It'll be awesome. But yeah, anything else to really add about season 50 or season 51?
Just this silly idea. They said every twist is on the table. How would you feel if hypothetically we get to season 51 and they're like, yeah, by the way, no advantages are in play. None. No idols, no shot in the dark, nothing. That was a twist. The idea of an advantage.
They're taking every twist off the table. I don't know. I think I just don't think Survivor would. I've never been a big fan of a back to basics season. I don't. It's not that the show can't hold its own without advantages. Obviously, it can. It did so for 10, 10 seasons. A lot of those seasons are great seasons. But at the end of the day, I think advantages really add something to the modern era Survivor. I think if we could cut back on them a little bit, that might be advantageous. It sounds like we might be doing the opposite, which is a little bit scary. But I don't think that removing them completely would lead to the most entertaining possible season by any means. Um, I guess if they did it though, we'd find out. So
Interesting. That's all I had for now, which I believe means that's it, folks. That's season 50 wrapped.
yeah, it was quite the season, and I always love, you know, watching week after week and getting to do this podcast and talk about it. It's been great. But now we're officially back into the off season, drifting in an endless sea of time until September, where we will finally get to talk about season 51 in full. But like I said, we have stuff planned for the time between, so I hope you guys are excited for that. I hope you guys enjoyed season 50. Let us know in the comments one person from season 50 who you would want to see return for another returning player season. Um, and just have a wonderful day. But with that being said, the pod has spoken.